Not every house is built on flat ground. Some houses are found in places far beyond any ordinary blueprint. Houses sit on a floating island, where everything is woven from reeds. Houses perch high on a single, upright tree trunk in the middle of a tropical rainforest. And if that height still isn't challenging enough for you, try a transparent room suspended from a sheer cliff. Looking at these houses, you might wonder, who would build a house in such a crazy place? And how can people live there? But for the residents, these houses are their culture, their pride, and most importantly, a place to call home. Would you dare spend the night in a hotel hanging from a cliff like capsules? At 1,200 feet above the ground, Skylodge is not a place to stay for the faint-hearted. The system consists of 3 transparent capsules. One side is secured with steel anchors drilled deep into the rock. The rest sticks out, suspended in mid-air. Each capsule is 24 feet long and about 8 feet wide and high. What makes them special is that each one has a bed, a dining area, a private bathroom, a toilet, and lighting powered by solar energy. Lying inside this unusual room, you get a 300-degree view looking down over the sacred valley. But even if you're ready, Skylodge still has another challenge waiting for you. There is no elevator or regular path to take you up to your room. You have to spend nearly 2 hours climbing the Via Ferrata yourself. Throughout the journey, you keep asking yourself, who would build a hotel in such a crazy place? But the moment you step into your room, you understand why. Thousands of run-down houses are packed together with no clear order. Beneath them is not solid ground, but dark water, almost impossible to move through. This is Makoko, a slum with more than 50,000 residents. Beneath each old, run-down house are dozens of wooden poles driven deep into the water. Household waste floats everywhere. Eating a banana and throwing the peel straight into the water is completely normal. Almost everything in Makoko happens on boats. Men take boats out to fish. Women paddle boats to bring fish to the market to sell. Children go to school by boat. They can even travel by boat on their own without any adult supervision. Despite living surrounded by water, the area faces a severe shortage of clean water. Residents have to buy fresh water from outside at a high cost. In addition, the houses packed closely together also create the risk of fires spreading from one home to another, threatening residents' homes. In one neighborhood of Setenil de las Bodegas, when you look up, what you see is not the sky. It's a natural rock overhang stretching for dozens of feet. This is one of the most unusual residential areas in Spain. Instead of removing the massive rocks before building, residents made use of the natural cliffs and rock cavities. From a distance, the houses still have ordinary white facades, but directly above them are rock roofs weighing thousands of tons. And it's not just houses. Restaurants, cafes, and market stalls are all located right under the massive rock. In some sections, the rock extends so far out that it covers the entire street. It feels like you're walking through a tunnel. Few people know that these rocks help keep the homes cool in summer and warm in winter. Even so, sipping a cup of coffee with a massive rock hanging right above your head can still be an extremely nerve-wracking experience. Seven giant black cones form a circle in the middle of the valley. Their thatched roofs reach almost to the ground. Ordinary walls are barely visible. These are Mbaru Niang, the traditional houses of Wae Rebo Village. At the center is a kompang, the sacred stone altar of the entire village. Each house is home to 6 to 8 families. Everyone shares the same living space according to Mangare tradition. Each Mbaru Niang has 5 levels. The bottom level is for daily living. The upper levels are used to store food. One level is used to store seeds, and the highest level is reserved for the ancestors. There is almost no cell phone signal in the village. Electricity is also only available for a short time. Night falls. The entire village seems to go back centuries. Around the houses, traditional festivals that have been practiced for hundreds of years are still held. At first glance, the small houses sitting on the flat grassland look relatively peaceful, but in reality, they are almost closed off by the high mountains of Vaga and sea cliffs. Gásadalur is a remote village in the Faroe Islands. It sits right below the highest mountain on Vaga. It is surrounded by the North Atlantic. Before 2004, Gásadalur was the only village in the Faroe Islands without a road connection to other villages. Residents had to use a mountain trail to trade. Today, a tunnel and the road system have made Gásadalur less isolated than before. But the location of the houses cannot be changed. Every year, strong winds, storms, and fog from the ocean cover the village for days. The houses are covered with a layer of grass to keep them warm during winter. In the harsh environment, the small community remains united and continues to hold on. On Lake Titicaca, the most important material for building houses is not concrete or wood. It is totora, a type of reed that grows right in the lake. Single-story houses made of reeds. Boats with curved bows made of reeds. Even the base of the floating island they are sitting on is made of reeds. There are about 80 Uros islands forming a chain across the lake. Their distinctive yellow-brown color stands out against the deep blue water. These islands are usually anchored to the bottom of the lake to keep them in place, but in principle, they can still be moved when needed. However, this layer of totora does not last. Because it absorbs water, it constantly decomposes. This requires residents to keep adding fresh reeds on top to maintain the surface of the island. And in reality, this island is not solid like the ground. When you step onto it, you can feel the surface sink under your feet like a large sponge. This neighborhood in the cliffs was built between 1180 and 1300. It was not a temple or a fortress. Mesa Verde was once home to the ancestral Pueblo people. The walls were built from sandstone and mud mortar. There was no need for a roof. The massive rock overhang above provided natural shelter for the entire settlement. Inside the rooms were fire pits, furniture, and small spaces for storing food. and kivas, spaces used for community gatherings and ceremonies. About 100 people once lived here, with 150 rooms and 23 kivas. On the rock walls, symbols left by the ancient people can still be seen. Visiting Mesa Verde today, you might ask, why build homes inside rock alcoves in the middle of a canyon? The answer is water. This area has no permanent lakes or streams, but many of the alcoves are located near seeps and small springs that emerge from the canyon walls. The cliffs also helped protect residents from wind and snow. Dozens of rooftops are packed together on a basalt cliff rising above the valley. The entire old town of Castellfollit de la Roca sits on a rocky ridge more than 160 feet high and nearly 0.6 miles long. This rock formation was shaped by the Fluvia and Toronel rivers on both sides, eroding it over thousands of years. Despite the difficult terrain, residents still decided to build their homes here. Red-roofed houses sit right along the edge of the cliff. Their walls seem to connect directly with the rock, dropping down toward the valley. Below are the deep drop and the river. At the end of the rocky ridge, the Church of San Salvador still stands tall, like a prayer for the safety of the entire area. Cars still travel along the roads as usual. Inside the old town, life still goes on peacefully. Narrow streets run between tightly packed buildings. Today, nearly 1,000 residents still live in this area of less than 0.3 square miles. Outside, the cliff continues to change slowly. There is no fixed rate of erosion or shrinkage each year, but the rock beneath the houses is not completely unchanging. A single wooden house sits pressed against a massive cliff. Behind and above it, the house is almost swallowed by the rock. In front, the slopes of the Alpstein Mountains open up. A single wooden house sits pressed against a massive cliff. Behind and above it, the house is almost swallowed by the rock. In front, the slopes of the Alpstein Mountains open up. This is the Äscher guest house, located at nearly 4,800 feet. No car can take you right to the door. You have to take the cable car up to Ebenalp. Then continue walking down the mountain, passing through the wild Kirchley caves for 1.5 to 2 hours. Inside the guest house are a dining room, kitchen, and resting area. In some rooms, parts of the walls and ceiling are the rock face itself. The house and the cliff seem to merge into one. This unique architecture attracts visitors every year. The restaurant serves popular dishes such as pastries, Appenzeller sausages, and local cheese dishes. This special meal tastes even better here than in an ordinary place, because outside the window are the Alpstein winds, cold mist, and temperatures dropping close to freezing. In the village of Monsanto, the rocks were not carved into the shape of houses. These granite boulders were already there, and people built their houses around them. Narrow streets wind around the rocks. Some houses are wedged between two boulders. Some use the rocks as walls and floors. In some places, an entire boulder sits above the house and serves as the roof. Residents call them casas de uma só telha, meaning houses with only one roof tile. Without ordinary doors, windows, and tiled roofs, you might mistake them for caves or stone structures. But these are homes. People have lived and gone about their daily lives here, just like in any other house. For 1,000 years, the grey rocks seem to have become part of everyday life. Some of the rocks are covered in moss, but they will remain there until they are worn away by nature or moved somewhere else by people. In the middle of the Kolmanskop desert stand large, multi-story houses, but few people know that the only resident living inside each of these houses is sand. Sand pours through the doorways, it slips through broken windows, it piles up inside the rooms. In some rooms, the sand has risen nearly halfway up the walls. Doors and staircases are slowly rotting away. The walls are moldy and covered in stains. In 1908, after diamonds were discovered, Kolmanskop quickly became a wealthy town. Large houses, a hospital, a school, and even a bowling alley appeared in the middle of the desert. As the diamond supply declined, residents gradually left. By 1956, the town was completely abandoned. Only the sand remained, moving deeper inside every time the wind blows, as if trying to swallow every building. At nearly 4,000 feet, a multi-story structure hangs against a sheer grey cliff. Sümela Monastery was built in 385 as a place of worship and daily life for Orthodox monks. To reach it, you have to cross difficult mountain roads and small bridges right beside steep drops. Behind the massive facade is a complex that once had up to 72 rooms, a library, chapels, and living spaces. At the center is a rock church carved into the mountain. Its walls and ceiling are covered with colorful Christian frescoes. Winter arrives. Snow covers the rock ledges and tiled roofs. The monastery seems completely isolated from the outside world. Perhaps this isolated location is what turned Sümela into a peaceful sanctuary where monks prayed and practiced their faith for centuries. Korowai houses appear in one of the last places you would expect, high up in trees above the ground. Traditional houses are usually raised 20 to 40 feet high. This height keeps the living space away from the wet, flooded forest floor, wild animals, and conflicts below. Each house is supported by a large tree and a system of wooden poles. Wood, vines, leaves, and other forest materials all have to be carried up from the ground during construction. The Korowai climb up and down using simple ladders carved from tree trunks and tied together with tree roots. In the living space above, families can rest, make fires, and go about their daily lives on the floor. Every trip to get food or supplies means climbing down and then back up again. However, these structures are constantly exposed to rain, wind, and the decay of natural materials. Climbing the long ladders is especially dangerous on rainy days when the wood becomes slippery. From the dry ground of Matmata, the houses are almost impossible to see. Instead of building walls upward, the Amazighs dig a large pit into the ground and turn the bottom into a central courtyard. From the surrounding earthen walls, they dig farther inward to create bedrooms, kitchens, and storage rooms. To enter the house, you have to walk through a tunnel dug through the ground. All the rooms face the open courtyard, which brings light and air into the living space. This unusual way of building helps people adapt to the hot, dry climate of southern Tunisia. The thick layers of earth act as natural insulation, keeping the inside cooler when temperatures outside rise. However, in 1969, prolonged heavy rain flooded or damaged many houses. Some residents had to move into new homes above ground. At the top of a vertical rock pillar on Mount Fanjing, people built two small temples at an elevation of about 7,664 feet. The summit rises about 330 feet and is split into two halves by a deep gap. Each side has just enough space for one structure. One side is a temple dedicated to Shakyamuni Buddha. The other is dedicated to Maitreya Buddha. A small bridge crosses the gap, connecting the two structures that seem completely separated. To reach them, you have to keep climbing steep stone steps that cling to the mountainside. In some sections, the path runs between two vertical rock walls, with only railings and chains for support. You have to rely on your own strength and balance. The first temples here were built during the Ming Dynasty. After many restorations, they still stand on the rocky summit among the clouds, a place where simply getting people to the top is already a challenge. At Tonle Sap, a house takes on two completely different appearances during the year. In the dry season, the water drops far down, exposing rows of tall wooden stilts underneath. The houses sit high above, while the ground between them becomes a place for people to walk and go about their daily lives. When the rainy season arrives, water from the Mekong flows back into Tonle Sap. The lake level can rise from about 3 to 33 feet. Roads disappear underwater. Residents go to work, shop, take children to school, or visit neighbors by wooden boat. This change forces daily life to adjust with each season. Transporting food, clean water, and supplies all depends on boats when the water rises. Fishing is an important source of income for many families, but this resource is not endless. This puts pressure on residents to protect their livelihood so future generations can continue living here. At first glance, Casa do Penedo looks more like a strange rock formation on a mountainside than a place where people could live. 4 massive granite boulders sit close together. The house was built into the gaps between them. The rocks were not moved or used only as decoration. They became part of the walls and structure of the house. Construction even began with the roof, so the building could adapt to the shape of the existing rocks. Its rough exterior makes Casa do Penedo look like it has been there for hundreds of years. But in fact, the house was only completed in 1974, originally as a place for a family to stay. Inside are 2 floors, along with a living room, kitchen, and resting area. The contrast between a functional house and the natural boulders has made it a popular attraction in Portugal. In Shirakawa-go, steep roofs rise like giant hands pressed together in the middle of the valley. This is also where the name Gasho Zukuri comes from, a traditional style of house designed to adapt to harsh winters. The roofs are covered with thick layers of thatch and have steep slopes. This allows snow to slide off more easily instead of building up and putting pressure on the roof. When winter arrives, snow still covers the village roads and fields and surrounds the wooden houses. To make use of the tall roof space, residents divide the area underneath into several levels. In the past, the attic levels were also used to raise silkworms. Even more surprisingly, the traditional structure relies mainly on wood and ropes. When the thatch wears out, many people in the village come together to replace the roof. This special way of building and maintaining the houses has helped these fragile structures survive for generations. The houses in Derinkuyu do not rise above the ground. They are carved deep into the rock. The farther down you go, the lower and narrower the passageways become. They connect to rows of rooms, food storage areas, livestock stalls, wine-making areas, and even chapels. Together, they form an underground city that reaches about 280 feet deep. To allow people to survive down there, ventilation shafts were dug through multiple levels. Water and food could be stored inside. When danger appeared, huge round stone doors could be rolled into place to block the passageways. Derinkuyu once became a shelter for thousands of people during periods of unrest. Instead of fleeing their land, they moved their entire lives underground, turning volcanic rock into a world where they could eat, sleep, and live beneath the houses above. Between the steep cliffs of the Andes, hundreds of rooftops suddenly appear on a slope that seems impossible to live on. The entire town of Iruya sits at more than 9,000 feet. Instead of flattening the land, residents built adobe and stone houses along the mountain slopes. Narrow streets wind up and down between rows of houses. The town is surrounded by deep ravines and massive cliffs. To get here, residents have to travel along a winding mountain road from Humahuaca, a journey that takes about 3 hours. Despite the isolation, life continues on these slopes. Residents farm, raise livestock, and maintain traditional crafts. Over generations, houses have continued to follow the terrain, turning a rugged mountainside into a home for an entire community. A strange capsule sticks out from a rocky ledge. Below it, there is almost nothing but open air. This is Bivacco Gervasutti, a shelter for climbers at more than 9,300 feet. There are no tiled roofs or familiar walls. The structure has a long body, round windows, and a white and red exterior that stands out against the rock and snow. Inside, there is only enough room for 12 people. The beds are placed close together. The section that sticks out has a large window looking straight down into the valley. On the roof, solar panels provide power for the systems inside. There are no streets or residential areas around it, only mountains, snow, and glaciers. To reach this place, you have to cross high mountain terrain on your own. Even before having the courage to stay here, simply getting here is already hard to imagine. The houses of Sassi di Matera seem to grow directly out of the cliffs. Instead of simply stacking stones to make walls, residents carved deep into the hillside to create living spaces. The stone they removed was then used to build the facades outside. Over time, More than 1,000 houses were stacked on top of one another, forming a huge maze. The terrain here is so unusual that the roof of a lower house can become a walkway for the house above. Stone stairways wind through each level, connecting caves with small courtyards and narrow alleys. Rainwater is directed through small channels into cisterns carved into the rock. In the past, many families lived in dark, damp rooms and shared the space with livestock. By the mid-20th century, worsening living conditions caused thousands of residents to leave the Sassi. The abandoned houses were later gradually restored, and people returned to live there. In Yanjin, land for building is so limited that the entire city has to stretch along a narrow gorge. In some places, it is only about 100 feet wide. Steep mountains rise on both sides. The Guanhe River takes up most of the space in between. Houses are therefore packed onto the small strips of land that remain, stretching along the river. When there is no longer enough space on the ground, residents build upward. Multi-story buildings rise close to the foot of the mountains. In some places, buildings extend right to the edge of the river. Tall concrete pillars support the structures above, while the water continues to flow directly underneath. Roads, bridges, and houses are all squeezed into a narrow corridor. From above, Yanjin looks like a city stretched into a long line between two mountains. Despite this unusual terrain, lights still shine from the houses and daily life continues. The houses in Jiezi do not simply stand along both sides of the road. The entire old neighborhood is mixed with streams that run through the streets and right beside the houses. Six old streets run through tens of thousands of square meters of traditional architecture. On both sides are houses that mostly date back to the Qing dynasty. Their fronts open into shops. Behind them are courtyards and family living spaces. Streams and small canals continue to wind through the town. People in the past built bridges to connect the neighborhoods, then built houses right beside the waterways. Grey tiled roofs, wooden porches, and stone-paved streets sit within a network where there seems to be no clear boundary between the streets and the water. What is hard to believe is that this structure is not just a place for visitors. After hundreds of years, residents still live and do business inside the old houses of Jiezi. At more than 16,600 feet, the houses of Tuiwa village still cling to the bare slopes, right beside Lake Pumayumko. The low houses are built with thick walls and flat roofs and surrounded by stone walls. Their white color stands out against the gray-brown plateau. Red lines run around the roofs. In some places, entire groups of houses sit right on cliffs, dropping down toward the lake. The air here contains only about half as much oxygen as at lower elevations. But inside these isolated houses, residents have continued to live and raise livestock for generations. Winter arrives. Pumayumko freezes between snow-covered mountains. When the grasslands around the village become scarce, residents lead their sheep across the frozen lake to islands where grass is available. Before the ice melts, they bring the entire flock back to the village on the shore. In the middle of Australia's dry desert, Coober Pedy looks like a forgotten town. The bare ground is covered with piles of rock and excavation holes. In summer, outdoor temperatures can rise above 104 degrees Fahrenheit. To escape the heat, residents did something hard to imagine. They dug straight into the ground and turned the rock into homes. Step through a small doorway, and a modern living space appears inside. Living rooms, kitchens, and bedrooms are carved deep into the rock. Temperatures inside these homes usually stay around 68 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Under Coober Pedy, there are not only houses, hotels, shops, and even churches are also built deep underground. Opal mining left countless tunnels beneath this area. Today, residents still dig into the rock, both to expand their living space and in the hope of finding valuable veins of opal hidden behind the walls. Civita di Bagnoregio rises like an island in the middle of the valley. Dozens of old stone houses are packed together on top of a rocky outcrop. Around them are deep ravines and steep slopes. To enter the village, you have to walk across a bridge nearly 1,000 feet long. It is almost the only route connecting Civita to the outside world. But the frightening part lies right beneath the houses. The soft clay underneath is constantly eroding, causing landslides around the rocky outcrop. More than 100 have been recorded over the centuries. Parts of the land around Civita keep disappearing. The village is getting smaller and smaller. Inside, the stone houses, narrow alleys, and medieval square still remain much as they did centuries ago. This long battle with erosion has given Civita a haunting nickname, the Dying City. The many openings across this cliff were once part of Vadzia, where people turned an entire mountain into a living space. Instead of building houses on the ground, they carved deep into the rock, creating a multi-level complex with living quarters, storage rooms, and churches. The spaces deep inside were connected by stairways and tunnels. Even water was brought inside for daily life. Vadzia was mainly built in the 12th century and developed into a system with as many as 13 levels. Inside, there were once 28 wine cellars with hundreds of large jars buried in the rock floor. But what you see today is only what remains. Earthquakes and wars over the centuries destroyed part of the cliff, exposing rooms that were once hidden deep inside. More than 240 caves are still preserved today, making the entire mountainside look like a giant building cut in half. There are no roads leading to the tops of these rock pillars, but hundreds of years ago, people still found a way to build and live there. At Meteora, stone monasteries sit on top of rock pillars hundreds of feet high. At one point, 24 monasteries stood in this landscape, separated from the ground below. Inside were living quarters, chapels, kitchens, and storage rooms for the monks. Before there were stairs, people used long, removable ladders. In more difficult places, a pulley system was used to lift food, materials, and even people up the cliffs. It was not until the 20th century that steps were carved into the rock to make access easier. Today, 6 historic monasteries still remain on the rock pillars of Meteora. Tiger's Nest, or Paro Taktsang, sits at more than 10,000 feet above sea level and about 3,000 feet above the Paro Valley. Its white walls and multi-level roofs cling to the rock face, with forest and a deep drop below. There is no road that can take a vehicle right to the entrance. To get inside, you have to walk several miles through the forest, continue along steps beside the cliff, and cross a waterfall. But this unusual location was not chosen by chance. Behind the monastery are sacred caves where Guru Rinpoche is believed to have meditated in the 8th century. In 1692, the present complex was built around those caves, turning an almost inaccessible place into one of Bhutan's most famous structures. From houses deep underground and homes clinging to cliffs to rooftops hanging high above the ground, people have found ways to live in places that seem impossible. Some were created to deal with harsh climates. Others were shaped by faith, isolation, or simply the need to survive. But whatever the reason, these houses all show one thing. When living conditions change, people always find ways to adapt and turn any place into somewhere they can call home. Of all the places you've just seen, where would you not dare to live? Leave a comment and don't forget to follow the channel to keep exploring.